It is my honor to announce our first guest and keynote speaker. He is from Portugal, and he is a man of many talents. He is a musician, an editor, a digital artist, an actor, a director, a researcher, an educator. The list seems to be never ending. In Madrid, he co-founded a virtual reality theater collective with a Spanish name I really can't pronounce. It means fourth wall VR. Currently, he works as a professor at the University of Passau in Germany, where he also founded the Future Media Collab. He is extremely knowledgeable in the field of immersive media, and he himself performs also in virtual reality. His speech today is about the theatreverse. What that is, let's ask him. Please welcome António Baía Reis. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Paula. Lovely. And let me start by saying what a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm not sure about the level of expertise that I have, but at least I've been engaged with immersive media and art-based research in the past few years. I want to say a special shout out to Dirk Foxy Neldner. I think that should be his nickname from now on, considering his beautiful Foxy avatar. So let me start by sharing my screen, okay? Okay, so quickly, thank you, Paula. You already sort of provided a brief overview about my profile. So I also perform in VR because I'm classically trained as a stage actor. So, and then my life took very, immense turns, and I ended up doing a PhD in immersive media in collaboration with the University of Porto in Portugal and Stanford University in the US. And so I became this hybrid person, which is very common now, to be a post-pandemic hybrid kind of a person, was an actor, now is a VR actor or immersive actor or metaverse performer. Well, let's go into my presentation, and hopefully I can provide you some ideas, some insights about my own practice and my own research insights upon my practice. So since the early days of virtual reality, digital media artists and technologists have kind of acknowledged virtual reality as a medium of inherent theatrical nature, or as Pimentel and Teixeira argue, virtual reality is all about illusion. It's about computer graphics in the theater of the mind. It's about the use of technology to convince yourself you're in another reality. Virtual reality is where the computer disappears and you become the ghost in the machine. The computer retreats behind the scenes and becomes invisible. On the other hand, theater itself possesses a unique quality of eliciting the creation of what one might call virtual worlds. That is to say, imaginary worlds where audiences are invited to embark on a dreamlike experience that goes beyond our everyday life. Thus, virtual reality can be seen as an innovative medium, tool, and canvas for announcing essential aspects of the theatrical experience, such as, and according to Dixon, visual spectacle, imaginary worlds, and transformative spaces, and most significantly of all, audience immersion. Truth is that combining performing arts with digital technologies is not something new, but rather an old phenomenon. Even if we talk about immersion itself, we can go back to caveman and cavewomen. Throughout the 1990s, for instance, one can find groundbreaking examples that make use of virtual reality and other related technologies to explore theater and performance in innovative ways. Works like The Placeholder, Dancing with the Virtual Dervish Virtual Bodies, and Osmos enabled pioneer experiences such as virtual flight, full body immersion with haptic suits, and navigating and dancing through a VR human body's 3D interior. Despite their innovative nature, these early VR and theater experiences were mostly site-specific art installations, accessible to a relatively small number of people and mainly art festival goers. Moving forward a few years, now what we are witnessing today is the emergence of entirely new forms of VR theater and performance that require, I believe, fresh academic and artistic inquiry. Whereas in the 1990s, VR theater and performance works were mostly experimental, accessible to very few people. Today, I believe we are at the threshold of the age of both consuming VR and VR as a social platform. So, as we all quite well know, VR social platforms like VR Chat, Meta, Horizon Worlds, or Rec Room are exponentially growing, with millions of users worldwide engaging in distinct, diverse social interactions on a daily basis. The difference here is that social VR allows its users to create obviously their own virtual avatars, as we saw by Dick's beautiful fox, with which they can, walk and interact with people in seemingly infinite worlds. And that is an experience that is quite close to real-life interaction. And finally, the macro factor, which I believe is more famous than Hamlet himself, is our friend COVID-19. And so obviously, with the rise of the worldwide COVID-19 crisis and its consequent social distancing measures, social VR became even more attractive as a medium of huge empathic potential for connecting people in engaging and safe ways. Moreover, with the effects of the pandemic crisis forcing theater and performance venues to close doors, theater and performance companies, collectives, and artists turned to digital technologies and worlds as kind of creative solutions for just keeping on doing their work, and obviously while exploring consequently new ways of creating, of delivering, of experiencing theater and performance. From Zoom theater to theater in VR, we are witnessing the emergence of innovative performing arts experiences that question the very essence of what live performance is all about. And it is within the context of this kind of emergent ecosystem that La Cuarta Pared VR, or the Fourth Wall VR, my live performance in VR project was born. So La Cuarta Pared VR was born in 2021 within Media Lab Prado in Madrid. We won a call for projects to develop the idea of creating live theater in virtual reality. And from the beginning, we wanted not only to create, but also to combine a consistent artistic practice with a coherent academic vision. Currently, we are actually collaborating with Vodafone in Madrid in their 5G innovation lab to create content for their metaverse. Here it comes, first time, my first reference to the word metaverse. We can talk about that later. So, and this Vodafone's metaverse is a platform which is still in the making, but I think the future seems quite exciting. So here's our dream team. I am the stage director, or better, virtual stage director, and also I'm in charge of academic research. Jorge Esteban Blain is our most talented creative director. Ima is a performer and storyteller. Roger is our developer and creator of worlds, and Stephanie is our producer and communication expert. So what tickles us? Well, things like, what exactly is acting in VR? What changes? What happens if we add virtual reality glasses to the actor's work? Also, does being an actor in virtual reality require us to be actors in real life? Or is this something totally new, and maybe it would be better to say that we are immersive performers? So through a kind of ethnographic-alike methodology, direct observation, analysis of our recordings, of our plays, and also even a kind of auto-ethnographic look at the work of the actors, mine included, we arrived at a first definition, work in progress, of what might live acting in VR be in terms of its main features. But let's not forget, we are talking about VR, which is a multi-expressive medium that is at the crossroads of performance, technology, cinema, gaming, psychology, and many other disciplines and nuances. So live performance in VR, I would say, first of all, is pure meta acting. Not in terms of Meta, now former Facebook, now Meta, not only in the classical sense of Meta, that it is a new paradigm that goes beyond previous concepts and practices, but also that the actor consciously challenges the limits of his own body as a performative device. Moreover, Meta here also refers to the ability to defy the laws of physics in virtual reality environments. And that consequently questions a classical notion of the actor's work, which is the idea of stage presence. VR theater is also eminently ludic and participatory, as it combines the immediate impact it generates on audiences, firstly of a strong gaming-alike feeling, with the predominance of interactivity as a major feature of this emergent art form. It goes beyond traditional immersive theater, since it is driven by an affective, with an A, and emotional embodiment, only possible in virtual reality, a true metasensorial, I would say, experience of whimsical nature that is sensorially, symbolically, and aesthetically very close to a lucid dream. The journey is unique, starting with becoming an avatar, one's skin in the theatrical metaverse, if you want to say it that way, through, and this is a fat word, through a kind of anthropomorphic process enabled by the combination of the illusions of immersion, presence, and plausibility that culminates with the appropriation of a virtual body. As one is fully formed in the metaverse, the journey goes on as the frontier between audience and performer becomes blurrier, and every person engages in lively and meaningful interactions triggered by a given dramaturgical construct. And this reveals its essence as a truly ritualistic, integrative practice, far away from the mere communication mediated by technology, and closer to a kind of a techno-conviviality of profound affective nature. The spect-actors, and it's not a new word, make the theatrical action happen through pure mimetic contagion, another not new word in this, it's been used before, not necessarily within the metaverse kind of ecosystem. So pure mimetic contagion that emulates real life physical and symbolical performances, going beyond language, connecting and interacting with the creative and performative unlimitedness of the metaverse. Bending the laws of physics, allowing people to fly with their avatars or become a giant. Virtual reality theater is socially driven, experimental in its nature, and limited, I would say, only by imagination. So, kind of wrapping up, the avatar and the metaverse theater stage that, they walk upon, I would say, is a blank canvas of possibilities upon which theater practitioners are only just discovering and exploring. Therefore, it can be argued that theater creators need to start with performing in the metaverse and not taking a performance in real reality, like Paula well put it, and transferring it to the virtual space. Writers must write in virtual reality, and performers must be native to the space to unlock its secrets. In order to have a greater, I would say, understanding of this research field and this emergent practice, I would say more study is required for social VR spaces and how we might use them as spaces for storytelling or story living. Furthermore, a more in-depth look into how we might use avatars as dramatic tools in our storytelling, as human to human, or as avatar to avatar is at hand. Through this brief academic, reflective, creative kind of overview, and also my art space research on this field, my idea today was to provide you with a kind of a gateway for a conceptual framework for live performance in virtual reality that might be seen as a theoretical insight for future research and creative practice in this field, and hopefully kind of a smooth kickoff for the day to come, and the kind of specific and super interesting projects that are going to be presented today. Truth is that the metaverse space is so new that I think it's still an unknown frontier of limitless possibilities. But there is definitely a wider world of unique human experience to be uncovered. Metaverse, multiverse, Madrid, planet Mars, real estate going digital, blockchain, embodied internet, NFTs, Pokemon, whatever. What we should be thinking about is stuff like Where might actors, performers, and artists fit in this emergent ecosystem? To what extent are we able to engage in an inner dialogue as humans, as people, to foresee our role in such digital environments? What amount of non-immersive / immersive ratio is ideal to envision and build such virtual worlds? And how does all of this connect with the arts and the cultural sector? How to standardize these emergent practices? How can we reach out to younger performers and integrate this in their artistic toolkit? If titanic virtual worlds are on the rise, there is no doubt they will be needing performers. Otherwise, they are empty worlds, ghost towns with no life at all. Interacting with actors and performers on the spot, real-time feedback, breaking news, artificial intelligence and bots can only take us so far, right? So in short, it is an exciting moment to create and experiment, but mostly to reflect on how these emergent practices might fit in today's and future arts and cultural ecosystem, which I believe is going to be clearly hybrid. So I would like to end with one of my favorite quotes, and it sort of seems to summarize somehow all of this quite well. It is from the French philosopher Gaston Bachelard, who in 1958 wrote in his book, The Poetics of Space. And he said, by changing space, by leaving the space of one's usual sensibilities, one enters into communication with a space that is psychically innovating. For we do not change place, we change our nature. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Antonio. That was really inspiring. Also for me, I'm a blogger and critic specialized in virtual reality storytelling. So I took quite some inspiration from your talk. We talk later in a minute on our panel discussion. For now, I really want to introduce our second keynote speaker, Franziska Ritter. She is a scenographer, a musician, an educator based in Berlin. She too has a very interesting background combining different disciplines. She has studied architecture, film and photography in Berlin and London and is currently pursuing her PhD in visual image of theater architecture. In 2019, she co-founded the Digital Competence Center of the German Theater Technical Society, where she and her colleague Pablo Dornhege investigate the potentials of VR and AR for theater. They have done really a series of projects, one of them being an exciting experiment called Spatial Encounters. Now, I think she will tell us more about it. We are very delighted to have you with us, Franziska. Welcome.
Welcome also from my side, and thank you for the introduction, Polo, and thank you to the Play On team for inviting me. I'm going to share the screen. Great. And as Paula already announced, I'm standing here as part of a team of 7 people where we led a research project for the last 2 years for the DTHG, so the German Oyster Center, and we founded this competence center for digitality and new technologies for theater, which is kind of, you can see the website link to inform yourself about what we've done. And the aim of that project was somehow to bring together immersive technologies. And in our case, it was the focus was on VR and AR technologies, and bring it together with the theater. And then maybe we form a new word, because we like to talk about the theater reality. Paula, you said the real reality, but we talk about the theater reality, which is kind of special because theaters in its own have a kind of own universe, own language, own process of doing things, kind of. And often it's not so easy to look into those temples from outside, also for developers and all the people working in the digital sector. So what we've done is to bring together those 2 realities, and did a lot of research, developed own projects, and did a lot of transfer into both worlds. So maybe just a quick image of how we understand the immersive technologies work as a tool, of course, but also kind of a communication, it's a kind of communication tool. And of course, as Antonio already had a lot in his impulse, we see it as an experience world. And if that comes together with technology, theater technology, or architecture, or stage design, that creates different aspects. In the center of all that is the human being, and it could be people or society, of course. And it's always good to start with that idea of who is doing it, for whom. This is always the key issue when we start to do new projects. And just a little glimpse into other stuff we've done. One aspect was like bringing cultural heritage to life, and we did this reconstruction of the Große Schauspielhaus here in Berlin, working together with theater archives, which is a very special kind of archive in museums, which is hard to collect because it's such an ephemeral topic. So what we've done here is find new ways of storytelling, put them into the building, the reconstructed building, and combine it with like virtual objects. And you can download it for free. So have a look if you have a VR goggle at home, it's online. And at the same time, we're taking care of the theater industry. So what we've done here is a prototype for an augmented instruction for curtain rail. So it's made for theater technicians on stage, behind stage, to make life easier in this hectic production world of theater business. So, and the third thing is, just as an example, we did a lot of research into virtual Bauprobe, so building rehearsal. It's a quite German name, and it's a quite German issue, having those Bauprobe at theaters. So we developed a lot of workflows, how to, like with an easy attempt, like using existing tools and software to work on that moment in theater production, to bring together scenographers, stage designers, and theater technique people to meet in a virtual space, to discuss, to plan, to design, and not spending that much money or needing that much technology, but make it easy. So it's all about the right workflow, how to deal with the data. So we did a lot of workshops with different theaters in Germany, and made a lot of experiments to define those workflows to make life easier in future. So it's still ongoing, but yes, because what we notice it, like this theater reality I talked about is a quite special one. It's not a new one. If you bring together extended realities with theater, you could, and you look into history, you really can see that it's not a new thing. It's in Baroque theater, you already have this kind of illusion-y world, and earlier theater's all about illusion and immersion, and you always bring together this kind of audience and this illusion world on stage with different kind of technology. And the same with augmented, like let's say on the left side, the Baroque machinery is kind of the proto virtual reality, and on the right side, like the Pepper's Ghost effect is of course kind of the beginning of the augmented reality technology. So and having that in mind, bringing together the audience and the illusionary world, I'd like to bring the topic more into music, which is the topic today for the talk. And I go for Pierre Boulez, who said one should basically consider the concert as a medium of communication, and concert could here also stay for theater play, as a medium of communication, as a lively encounter between active persons, whether they are listeners or creators. So putting the focus onto that topic of encounter, that brings us to digitality, which is exactly that. Thinking of this pure definition of digitality is about connections based on encoded media and technologies, but between people and objects, and between objects. And always having that in mind, I think this is very important. If you do project about digital metaverse thing, it's all about the connections and the encounter. So that brings us to that project I'd like to talk about today, spatial encounters. co-creation for hybrid real stages. So what we did in our team here in Berlin is to research exactly that, the hybrid reality. So our interest was in finding new ways of developing ideas for the space between the real space, maybe the theater reality, and the digital hybrid, the digital space. So kind of looking into that multi-reality, where we do have variable time, space, reality constellations, like in having one virtual space with you and yourself, but also in a group as a social medium, and bringing that together at different places and spaces and connecting it in the end with the analog world, with analog audience. So that was the aim of that project, to really intertwine those analog and digital spaces to one common space, and have a closer look on all that, what is in that network happening, what potential is there. So we started to do little experiments, and hopefully you can hear the sound now. With one violinist from Leipzig, David Webel. It's before COVID, so 2019 we started just with like tilt-brush existing programs to see what happens if some influences come from outside and the musician is going to react on what he's seeing in his virtual glasses. That worked quite well, and there was a lot of fun, of course. We tried it the other way around, which didn't work that well, but as you can see, it's all about those connections, also in a touchy way, of musician and audience here as an activated part in the performance. So we started to think about a system where the audience creates the space as a this was called virtual traces. So this is the mood board for this co-created design, because we tried it alone, but of course it should be a group experience where the audience also influences itself with the other and the musician. So in fact, we do have this triangle between audience, so the public, the musician, and the space. So we did some experiments with traces and leaving traces in the space by moving through space. And we tried it out in some sports hall. And the next step was to build up connections between the people and creating sculptures by moving. So as an avatar, you kind of define the color, you kind of define the positions in space, and you create together as a group of 3, you can create a sculpture. And if you're 6 people, you can create 2 sculptures and really intertwine. So the space is really evolving at the moment. So we did experiments with that, and then we noticed, okay, we need more. So we created a whole world around this sculpture and color system. So we have a horizon where we can put a surface on, and we have a kind of a foggy atmosphere we can take influence on. And as you can see, it looks quite simple, because maybe this is the moments where you can put the link into the chat. We're working with this WebXR technology. So it's online, and you can really, wherever you are, build up this system. So it's more than just a finished performance. It's kind of an open, we call it Instrumentarium. It's more like a tool we created, like an instrument where other people can play with. So what you see here, that are just our first tryouts, how we would like to use it. And we created different worlds and different sceneries with it, but it's kind of an editor-like thing where you can decide which color comes with which movement, or and so on. So here you see some landscape kind of things, some more artificial ones, so here you can see that. So you have this landscape, you have this atmosphere, you can decide on the floor, on the surface of the world, and you have the avatar thing. Which we decided at the beginning to be really simple, more like a Oscar Schlemmer-like costume, which has a kind of a lazy follow effect. You see it in the trailer soon. So people are starting to move because they want to try out how this costume-like thing moves in space. And we were really surprised how people really enjoyed, by such a simple thing, moving. So we brought all this to a little chamber music festival in Thuringia, so in the rural area near Erfurt, and had 1 week to put this prototype into reality. And that was the space. So we had this kind of, called a Scheune, I don't know the English word, like this, as you can see, not really romantic, but it's great for as a playground. So, and we took the audience, which who was already there, and made a lot of experiments with them, with the musician, but also with the children, for example. And even then, like 5 days before premiere, we put new effects in it, or we're very inspired by that. So in the end, it looked like that. And here that brings me to this topic of how the real space connects with the virtual space. And so we developed different anchor points in both worlds, which made it somehow noticeable for the audience to where am I, who am I, and how can I move. And of course, you need kind of a safe zone, a comfort zone, which is really important if you bring VR to people who never experienced VR in their life. So that's the first step. And the second one is to then just start playing with all those methods you have in virtual reality, to bring them in a new scale, to jump into the sky and they lose their floor. So you have to do that in a very subtle way that people still don't get sick, and so on. So here you see the setup, which is kind of a 100 square meter space, and the musician in that case outside of the play zone. In the next version, we would like to integrate him more into the middle of the play zone. But for the beginning, that was the setup. It was made for 6 till 9 people at the moment. That worked quite well. And so one performance kind of lasts 20 minutes, and every performance is different, of course, because it's made by the audience. So we had sessions which were quite calm. We had sessions, especially at night, they were more movable, more dynamic, and like what they created as a group, the musician was going to interpret. In that case, he is a classical musician with an electronic background, so it was kind of a atmospheric space there, but we could also imagine to be at a jazz orchestra or some whatever kind of music you want to try out with that system. That's one point. And the other thing is that also, like from the audience, we could imagine that could be dances, that could be a more choreographed way of doing it. So there are so many possibilities to work on now with that instrument. And here on the right side, you can see how simple this editor is. And it's something you could work on as well. So before we play the trailer, I would like to thank all of you. And if you like, try this. It's a prototype, and you can download the code. And it's meant to be a starting point so that maybe other artists are going to crash into that system and experience that world. So please, Sven, go for the trailer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Franziska. Antonio, I also invite you back on stage because we're starting a Q&A now. Just before we start, to our audience, you are invited to submit your questions, and please do so. Anything you have in mind, you can send us your questions via the platform reaction link at the right side, like Marius explained at the beginning. You have a little button called questions, and there you can submit your questions, and I'll get them and try to ask them to our speakers. So maybe the first question for Franziska, because you just had you just had a keynote. Yesterday when we talked, we had a little pre-talk before, and you said to me, you could at least name 10 different ideas what to do with this tool you created also for other creators if you had the budget. So imagine I gave you a ton of money, which I would if I could. What would you do with it?
Well, first of all, I would invite more scenographers to develop other kind of scenographies for that, or words for that. I'd like to test that with dancers. I'd like to work with choreographers. I'd like to work with a big orchestra. And of course, it would be interesting what happens if you do that with 20 people and not only with 6. So, but this will take some ages, I think, to have a stable digital connection there. So there are many ideas. And also I could imagine or what we tried in a little experiment as well, if you have a fixed choreography or musical piece, if you want to work on a piece of music, which is not real time, but predefined. So what happens then? So there are so many possibilities, and that's the interesting thing. Maybe it's not a finished piece. It's an open process, and this is kind of a new thinking. And of course, there are pieces like that in theater or in performance, but really to have this now as a tool, as a play, is fantastic.
Yeah, I think so too. And I loved, by the way, the children who are like, children are always the best testers, right? They have so much energy to do that. So, Antonio, speaking of money, which is a dumb theme, I know, but I'm nevertheless very interested in it. Do you think live virtual reality shows like your collective is doing can be in the future considered a source of income for theaters and performance groups? And if not, what would be necessary?
Well, that's the tricky question. I thought you were going to do a follow-up and what do I would be doing with a lot of money if I would be the boss. I would be doing so many crazy stuff with mostly, educating, going to acting schools and setting up new modules on this. But well, let's talk about business then, which is not necessarily my cup of tea, but it's something that we have to consider. So if this kind of gigantic parallel reality is actually emerging, and if there is a new ecosystem where there is the possibility of generating income. So, and this idea of the metaverse is at the crossroads of, it's not just about virtual reality and immersive technologies. It is our gateway. It is a technology that enables us to be in those worlds. But then we're talking about this Web 3.0, which is something different. And basically before, or at least what we have now, the Internet 2.0 is that we own very few things there. I own AntónioBaiaReis.com, and that's it. What I have on my Instagram, it's not my own. Mm-hmm. If Instagram wants to take it out, it takes it out. The thing is now, what I was saying, blockchain technologies and cryptocurrency and digital estate, real estate going digital, we can own a piece of digital land. And what we saw is that, especially with the rise of social VR platforms, is that serious issues started to populate these ecosystems. I remember seeing, like 1 year ago, this political campaign on a social VR platform. And that was bogging my mind. I was like, oh, politicians are going to these platforms. It's becoming serious. It's becoming relevant, journalistically relevant even. And so the thing is that, well, the arts and the cultural sector always have struggles with getting money, I was mostly of my time a stage actor, and unfortunately I had to move to other areas in my life, and to academia, which in the beginning it was strange, then it became sort of a passion at the end, and sort of combined by both areas. But to go straight to your answer and to your question is, there are ways of generating this. For instance, the kind of work that we're beginning to do with Vodafone, because they're creating their own metaverse.
Yeah, congratulations for that, by the way. That's really amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I hope we're not going to be swollen by the El Dorado and and all the business around it. But I think it's all about finding a kind of a balance and understanding what the audience wants and understanding how we can sort of monetize with that. So theater collectives doing emergent work like the one I'm doing in Madrid can definitely create kind of experiences that fit in a more kind of wider, mass kind of ecosystem where people can go to these worlds and go to this kind of micro theater experiences. Because I don't see, like, in terms of business vision, the kind of works that I'm doing now in my collective, like 15-minute kind of VR pieces with cyber sickness associated, all of that being something that's going to be widespread. Yeah. There are ways of doing it. And I'll finish by saying this. In the same way that myself as an actor did a lot of things in the real reality, I did pieces as a protagonist on national theater in my country, but I also did gigs as an animator in corporate events, in times of struggle. So if these worlds are going to be digital twins of our real reality, live performers are going to be needed. And so I think the key is in educating younger performers instead of bringing, like, people from Hollywood to get into VR acting. It's sure. Like, sure. So yeah, there are ways of getting money. Artists always find a way to do that eventually,
Yeah, well, speaking of the creative process, I think that's also very important for our audience. So thank you so much, Antonio. You told us about teaching the actors of today and also the younger generations of actors how to work in these environments, and I think going a bit deeper into that in a minute. But for now, Franziska, to get you back on board, how would you what advice would you give to performers and theaters who want to start with a creative process of this virtual mixed extended reality work? What should they consider when they really think of their first ideas?
Well, what for us was always really important to really fast go into the tryouts and make it just as a quick, even if we work digital, we always do the analog performance thing of, okay, let's test it, how we would move if we would be in VR. So we use like this methods of theater also for our own development, which is like kind of a prototyping issue, not new, but this is kind of really important. And for theater people, because I'm also teaching at university, like in scenographers or theater technicians. So I'm really much into that education thing as well. Honestly, I have to say that we have a long way to go at universities, because they are glimpses of here workshop, there's a seminar, there are new programs arising, but it takes. I mean, universities are like theaters, big big ships going slowly, but when they go, they go. So it's really important to push that it comes into education. And for young professionals, I would say get help. For example, the DTRG has kind of educational programs also for free, like little workshops or lectures or a conference like that. It's so important that you have a first step into that virtual reality issues. And the net is full of there's so many offers of getting into that world. So get in contact with the technology, visit those places, talk to colleagues, go to the Bund der Szenografen, for example, or the DTRG on those websites. You have like kind of working groups dealing with that topic, like meeting once in a while, talking about that. So it's not so difficult to get into that world.
Yeah, thank you so much. I totally agree. Well, they're coming. Well, I have a bunch of questions for you, but they're coming more and more questions from the audience. Great. And let's a little bit dig into that. This is actually a question I had too. It is for both of you. And the audience member asked if you could talk a little bit more about liveliness of digital performances. How does it differ from the classic physical theater? And especially to Antonio, how does acting is different? Can you give like one or two concrete examples? Well, I start Antonio, and then we're going to Franziska. Oh, okay, Franziska, what do you think of it?
Okay, well, it's more like that question goes more into the direction of the actors, but I can talk about the space.
Yes,
because,
you are a scenographer, so space,
yes.
Just for our audience, space is like a very crucial part in virtual reality. It's world building and story building that is more creating experiences than story scripts. So this is a good profession to be in virtual reality.
So what I found interesting in that hybrid real space, that you give all the responsibility to the audience. You as a scenographer you have a little impact on that because you designed the space in a way, but then you have to let it go and really see what happens in real time. And also for the audience, this is quite an interesting moment. So it's getting really complex. And I guess no one really gets the full thing. So it's like for those 20 minutes, you're really into this Zoom world, and then afterwards, like weeks after, if you looking back on that experience, you really start to understand what was happening there. So this is something like you have to have in mind that in those systems, you're never able to get the full picture. So, and that is really an interesting thing between those analog and digital spaces. This kind of, we call it third space. It's kind of an in-between space, which either exists without the virtual or the analog thing, but it's hard to grab. So this is a third layer in between this, which is really nice to explore somehow. It's hard to explain if you're not experiencing it, but I'd like to put the emphasis on the space in itself.
Yeah, I think you achieved that brilliantly. It's really nice. I like the Schlemmer-like costumes that are a spatial element itself, right? So I think that fit very, very well. Antonia seems to have internet problems, so we're just going on. I have many questions also for you. There are two very practical questions, I'd say, and they are perfect for you, Franziska. One says he or she, they are a venue owner, and they ask, besides providing equipment, how can we help young artists to start researching or creating mixed reality works? And at the same time, just a second question, what can they do about motion sickness?
Sorry, I didn't get the first question.
Yeah, the first question is how can venue owners provide help, besides just giving equipment, provide help to young artists who want to dig into mixed reality? Oh, hi, Antonio.
Hi, Antonio. Welcome back.
I'm so sorry. There was a power cut. I don't know what happened. A quick power cut, and I'm in Madrid. I'm not in the middle of the Black Forest. I'm so sorry about that. Then again, it gave us an extra layer of a dramatic kind of moment into it,
we are just in a very practical way. I asked Franziska what venue owners can provide young artists who want to dig into virtual or mixed reality.
So what we developed in the last 2 years is this kind of system of renting technology to ensembles or free artists or younger artists. They are not able to afford themselves a VR package. So kind of this cooperation between state-funded institutions or venues. I don't know who's asking that question, but I guess it's more into that direction. And giving those sets of VR or AR or whatever technology package temporarily to young ensembles or artists to experiment with it. I mean, this is really a big issue, to have enough time to explore this world. It's not a product you just like, the project is not finished. Like maybe if you do a normal stage design, you know what to do. But if you do it for the digital world, you need a bit more time. You need time to explore. So it's important to provide the technology to those young artists as here you have it for 6 months, and then you try it on, and then span the network to other experts. So in fact, in that theater industry, we can only work on that together.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Just also a very practical question, and I ask you both to answer very shortly. What can you do about motion sickness? That is something that people fear. Antonia, maybe you start.
Well, pills. Here's the thing. In my personal case, I have traditional motion sickness. So I'm one of those kids that didn't evolve physiologically. So I still have motion sickness and I'm 34. So what do I do is if I travel by car, by train, by balloon, whatever, more than 1 hour, I have to take one of those pills. So the thing is, we have to think, well, technology has arrived to a certain point where frames per second allow us to have less, cyber sickness. So the ideally, what is going to happen in the next few years is that we're going to reach to this point where our brain doesn't get mixed up and, tells us, oh, where are you at? Physically, you're not doing this and you're walking. So I think we're going to arrive to that moment. But it's going to take a few years in the same way that's going to take a few years to arrive to the actual metaverse or whatever that is. But I would say you have to understand your audience and go to the studies. There's a lot of studies about cyber sickness done, like the Stanford VR lab does a lot of work on that. And so there's kind of average, the numbers of minutes you can have as a reference. I would say, for instance, for a theater performative interactive experience, I would say ideally you would go to 15 to 20 minutes, but that doesn't mean you can't do like a 1 hour or 2 hour thing. That might happen. But yeah, it's a struggle because we haven't reached a point where we have like this full pack that helps us deal with this. So yeah, it's always a tricky issue. Yeah.
Franziska, has your audience experienced motion sickness? Probably not, because they are not moving so much, do they?
Well, they are moving, but in fact, the movement in the virtual and the analog space is the same most of the time. So we had that in mind because we had some tricky experience where we reconstructed the Große Schauspielhaus, which is kind of a moving experience, but you are following somebody else, which is always kind of strange thing. And especially if you go staircases. So we did a lot of experiments with that. I mean, I just had this link in the chat. Maybe you have a look there. As Antonio said, there's a lot of research about it, but as a designer or creator, you should have in mind that issue and really test that. And people are really reacting differently. And it's nothing to do with age. I guess children, I know that children have no such problems, not in that extent, but still it's not if you're 20 or 60, that doesn't make any difference. It's really a personal thing. There are some people who really, there's no motion sickness at all, and some really suffer a lot with that. So you won't solve this problem, but by creating those spaces, you could have that in mind and really deal with some tricks.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I mean, the audience are our guests, right? And we need to invite them and make the space as comfortable for them as we can. So that is very important. Thank you for that question. I have another question that was my second last question, the last question for Antonio. Well, no, actually, it's a question for both of you. Somebody asked that they heard the term lucid dream and about the similarity of virtual experience and lucid dreams. So they ask, where does this similarity comes from? Why are lucid dreams and virtual reality are connected? Antonio, maybe you can say something about it.
That's a very poetically nuanced question. Well, I read a lot of Freud in my time. Now, it is kind of like a lucid dream in the sense that it's kind of connected to this very basic idea that in virtual reality worlds, we go against the laws of physics as we know it in our physical world, which is this possibility that we can fly. And the same way that when we are in there are these various stages of sleep, and there is like this almost conscious state, like the first stages of sleep, before you go deep into the REM sleep, which is this idea that we feel like we are awake, but we're not, because we're probably like flying or having this wonderful meal, but we're actually not having it. So it's this idea that we're in this virtual world with this kind of illusions and things that do not match our tangible reality. And so it might be comparable to a lucid dream. It wasn't a full philosophical / anthropological question, but more like a poetic, comparison that I did.
Yeah, and it's also a lot about shaping this world, right? Because a lucid dream is a dream you can walk in, you can be there, and you can create the world. So Franziska, the second last question for you today. I take the freedom to go some minutes over time. I'm sorry for that. But what do you think about a lucid dream? Well, you had a lucid dream-like experience. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the immersion and the level of immersion we want to create. And in our case, in our performance, that was one of the terrains that really they have for 20 minutes, they are blown away because they're in an own world. What I always find interesting, and we use a lot of fog in that experience, and to narrow the field of sight, and those spaces were kind of the strongest ones. You really felt like you are in a, James Turrell, those spaces where you really dive into a light atmosphere, a light space. So for me, that were kind of the strongest spaces, not those concrete ones or those like with, okay, here's the sun and there's a tree or whatever. So this doesn't really work for me because it's still too gamey maybe from the design part. And I think we have to work on that, how to design those immersive spaces. And especially working with the fog thing and narrow it down, having different color of fog, that made me kind of feeling in a lucid dream.
Yeah, in a very new world, actually. That's really fascinating. So the last hour, I could talk with you for hours right now, but the last question also comes from our audience. It is a big question, but I ask you nevertheless to answer it shortly. Antonio, what are your thoughts about the metaverse?
Well,
I know a hard question now.
With all due respect to whoever asked the question, I'm so tired of that question by now. But here's my thoughts on the metaverse or the multiverse or Planet Cuckoo Land. Here's what I think. First of all, I think on a first level, it's a big, major rebranding coup d'etat, which is good. Then it becomes a buzzword. Then we're seeing everyone on LinkedIn changing their profiling to suddenly they're all metaverse experts. And what about the informatic engineers who have been working with VR since the 90s and the 60s and the 70s? Or people like me who are like working in live with immersive technology since like 2014, 15, which is okay. Here's what I think. I think we saw that NFT is getting into kind of a burst now thing. It's hyped. I think that Can you just
explain what NFTs are, because some of our audience might not know that?
So it's this idea that we can, artists can create, digital artworks, and those have property based on blockchain technology.
What you said before, right? Mm.
That allows them to have property, the same way that I can buy a piece of land in the metaverse, and that's mine. So there are very nuances there. It's not necessarily my expertise. Well, I think the idea of the metaverse, if we take the buzzword and the hype, and we use that to our own benefit to help build up something that is kind of infrastructural, that we kind of define it as an inclusive space, as something artistically, economically, sociologically sustained, that might be interesting. What happens now, there is no such thing as a metaverse by now, which is this one big parallel world to our reality. There are a few verses there, Meta as its own. There are platforms, Fortnite, Rec Room, VR chat, etc. They're becoming huge. The idea is that this metaverse is this big place which can be interchangeable. Like my avatar can go from this place to that one. I can do everything that I do in the physical world there. I think we're still in the hype phase, but I make use of it. I've published papers with the metaverse on the title. I sold a little bit of my soul to the devil without compromising my entrance to paradise. So I think we can take advantage of the hype and to create something to establish coherent foundations, more than just quick turnaround hype moments for quick turnaround money, I would say. But I totally agree.
Yeah, I agree. It is a really complex discussion. Franziska, you as scenographers, you at the Digital Lab, you're trying to claim that space for artists and for theaters. What are your thoughts on the metaverse? As final question, last word.
Yeah, just quickly, as addition to Antonio, I just think it's really important that we as artists, as theater people, really go into that and don't leave the field for the game designers or whoever is going to build that up. So it's really important that we as artists make a strong effort on dealing with that and exploring it and make us strong in that world. So as a space, it's totally interesting, of course.
Yes, thank you for that. As a space, it's like Antonio said before, limitless. People can time travel and they can create monsters, they can fly, they can become giants. So I think we need to keep in mind that the metaverse is much more than a hype, is much more than a space for companies to sell their brands. It is also an incredible creative space. And this is the topic we talk today, like really, really deep when we go into the case studies after a very short break of, now I'm sorry, I shortened the break, of a break of 5 minutes. So we are continuing at 11:15. So go to the toilet, grab a drink, and we see in 5 minutes. Thank you so much for the audience. Thank you so much, Franziska and Antonio. It was wonderful to talk with you.